Hello, Bulldogs. Welcome to our next edition of Democracies in Crisis. Today, we're going to learn about Hungary and the mafia state. So, critics of the current regime in Hungary like to refer to it as a mafia state. And what they mean by the term of mafia state is that the government in Hungary has a sort of peculiar form. It looks like a democracy on the outside. It has the trappings of a democracy. There are elections. There is what looks like a free press. There are courts that are supposed to be independent and so forth. So it looks on the outside like a regular democracy. But actually, the whole thing is being manipulated by the Prime Minister of Hungary, who has no danger of being voted out of office, whose name is Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban is the godfather of Hungary. How does it work? Well, I'm going to talk about how Orban got into power in the next video, and you have a number of readings for class today that explain how Orban transformed Hungary from a democracy into a mafia state. But I want you to just to understand what the idea of a mafia state is. So the idea of a mafia state is that there is a total merging of the institutions of government, the parliament, the courts, the regulatory bodies and so forth. They're all sort of interwoven with Viktor Orban and Viktor Orban's private interests. And it's not even the private interest, it's also the economy. So the way the economy works in Hungary is there are a number of, the state is very involved in the economy. You really can't be a successful businessman, you can't run a successful business if you don't have the support of this Hungarian state. The Hungarian state distributes money, it regulates or negotiates tenders for businesses, and so none of that is really transparent or fair. Really, only those oligarchs, those businessmen, get jobs or money if they are friends with Viktor Orban, and friends with Viktor Orban are on his good terms because he's the godfather of this mafia state. So, how does it work? Well, I'll give you an example. This is a long time ago. Orban's been working on this for 10 years, but one of the first things he did to try to create this sort of mafia economy was he passed a law that required all tobacco stores in Hungary to receive a special commission or authorization from the Hungarian state. And it turns out that there were already lots of traffic or tobacco stores all over, but a lot of people who had the stores, they couldn't get this special commission from the Hungarian state, or this special permission. Or they applied, lots of them applied, but they didn't get it. The only people who won these were like tenders. That won the tenders were people that were close to Orban's government or friends with Orban. And so all of these people who run the tobacco stores went out of business, and a small percentage, and these stores all transferred hands into a small group of people who are on Orban's good terms. And so now all the tobacco stores in Hungary are basically run and owned and operated by friends of Viktor Orban. In fact, what they call this the national tobacco stores, because every tobacco store in Hungary is essentially a pro-Orban institution. And this is just the first thing he did, but he did this with every kind of business. So he passed regulations that forced banks to go under, or to basically transfer their ownership over to businessmen who were on good terms with Viktor Orban. This is what he did with the press. So one by one, the independent free media, because it's a business after all, would fold. For example, newspapers couldn't get any advertisements, because if you advertised in a paper, if you're a company and you advertised in a paper that was critical of Viktor Orban, then the government, the Hungarian government, would never give your business any business. You would get harassed by the tax authority. You would be unable to win tenders. You just couldn't do business. So businesses knew, if I want to be successful, I better not advertise in newspapers that are, or other kinds of magazines that are critical of the government. So what happens? Well, those newspapers, those independent newspapers or media sources, run out of money. They fold, and they're bought up. They were bought up by oligarchs friendly to Viktor Orban because they're part of the family, the Godfather, and then they're changed, right? And they start running pro-government reports or propaganda. So slowly, Orban took over all of the media in Hungary, not in the sense that he directly intervened like in a totalitarian state or something like that, or told them what to say, but that all the newspapers were owned by people friendly to Orban, because it was impossible to run a critical newspaper of the government. It's impossible to run a newspaper critical of the government without becoming financially unviable. And so that's the way this mafia state works. It doesn't. It looks on the outside like a democracy. It has all of the features of a democracy, but it's really run by this Godfather who's pulling all the strings. So everything that happens pretty much happens because Orban Viktor wants to run it that way. It's not a totalitarian state. It's a kind of, either they call it a managed democracy or a competitive autocracy. There are other parties. There are other parties that run for office in the parliamentary elections, but they have no chance of getting into power. And so it's all kind of manipulated. It's all run basically by Viktor Orban, which is why we call it the mafia state. The only thing you can do in Viktor Orban's Hungary is smoke cigars. So what I'm going to do next, in my next video, is I'll just give a little history, a quick history of how Hungary's history from communism through a period of democratic transition until the time that Viktor Orban took it over and converted it into the mafia state. See you in a bit.